Hi, I'm Colin G. West, and this is Poker Science. We have to talk about ace-king. Stop me if this is familiar. You know you're supposed to raise with it because it's a big hand, yet you kind of hate to do that because you feel like you never like the outcome. For a lot of people, playing ace-king is more stressful than going through airport security while calling your cable provider's customer service number. But the first step to overcoming a problem is understanding it. So let's do this. If you feel like ace-king is haunting you, you're not crazy. Of all the big hands, ace-king really is the most common. On average, you'll look down on ace-king more often than aces or kings combined. So if you're mentally keeping track of how often you get things like ace-king or big pocket pairs, you might get frustrated because it's showing up a disproportionate amount of the time. Worse, when it does show up, it's only going to be suited 25% of the time. Ace-king suited is actually more rare than pocket aces. So if it seems like the only big hand you ever get is ace-king off, just remember, this isn't a sign that you're getting bad luck. It's a normal mathematical part of the game. But okay, so you've got your ace-king. Why is it so tricky to have to play it? Well, to start with the obvious, the prospect of winding up all in with a hand like ace-king is always stressful. Big hands like aces, kings, or queens are comforting in part because the outcomes are fairly binary. Let's say you have kings pre-flop. If your opponent has aces, you're pretty well sunk. But you're crushing everything else with at least a 70% chance to win. Things are either going to be awesome or just terrible, kind of like when a new Star Wars movie is coming out. But the point is, the outcomes are so polarized, it's easier for our brains to come to terms with the risk involved. But if you have ace-king, things aren't so straightforward. Pocket aces and pocket kings have you crushed, of course, and other pocket pairs are a coin flip. And you're doing really well against an ace or a king with a worse kicker. But for almost all other hands, from Jack-10 suited to 7-deuce off, you're only expecting to win about 60 to 65% of the time. Ambiguity like this is harder to cope with psychologically. If you could get it in with ace-king against a random hand over and over again, you'd make money in the long term, but you'd also lose a significant portion of those hands along the way. Because their strength is more statistically spread out, it becomes harder to convince yourself in any particular instance that they deserve their status as a top 10 starting hand. Of course, this is just the pre-flop stress. Because ace-king has its biggest advantage against hands like ace-queen or king-10, and because hands like those might well fold to a pre-flop re-raise, there are lots of situations where you'll want to see a flop with ace-king. Don't let your fear of frustration talk you into ending the hand early if you think there are a lot of hands like these that your opponent could have, but do be prepared for what's going to happen next. When you see a flop with unpaired cards, you'll only make a pair about a third of the time. So if no aces or kings show up, don't panic. That's normal. If you had your opponent dominated, you're probably still ahead in the hand. And even if you didn't, say they have Jack-10, the odds that you both failed to make a pair are still around 50%. There's no reason to feel that you're out of the hand just yet. Time to start thinking about what they might have, what they think you have, and how you'd respond if they called a continuation bet. This helps us see the second reason why ace-king is so stressful. If you have pocket aces or pocket kings, you can often win post-flop even if you don't have a good read on what your opponent might have. Ace-king is not quite so forgiving. To play it well, you can't let yourself get locked into an assumption about your opponent's cards. Yes, they might have kings or queens, in which case you could be in trouble. But depending on the situation, they might be much more likely to have things like ace-queen or ace-jack, in which case you're the one that's actually in control. So there you have it. If playing ace-king strikes you a little bit like owning a pet monkey, in the sense that it sounds awesome until you imagine actually having to do it, the good news is you're not alone, and you're not crazy. It really is a tricky hand that shows up more often than more comforting hands like aces and kings. Just remember, poker is a game where small statistical advantages will work out in the long run, even if you lose some heartbreakers along the way.